Chapter 51-24. Fu Wenhao and Long Hua. These two fellows could be considered the strongest of the 5th grade disciples. Of course, Kong Xinmu wasn't included, because Kong Xinmu was no longer on the same level as them. Although Fu Wenhao and Long Hua were both transcendent gods, they were on a different level from Kong Xinmu. Therefore, Kong Xinmu didn't really care about his opponents. Fu Wenhao and Long Hua, on the other hand, now viewed Kong Xinmu as their #1 enemy. Although they originally didn't care about the Dragon Warrior students below the Transcendent God rank, now, Kong Xinmu's strength had become a threat to them. Soon, they would find out that Kong Xinmu wasn't just a threat to them. Next up was the 4th round of the finals. Only 16 people were left. Of those who could reach this stage, who wasn't a dragon or phoenix among men? Yi Yin was also among the 16. Next up was the most important round. One had to know that the top 10 of this round would receive much more points than the later rounds. Therefore, once one made it to the top 10, their rewards would be greater than the average person's. Now that there were 16 people left, in other words, 6 more would be eliminated. Those who lost the next round would continue to fight the other losers until the 9th and 10th places were decided. The winners would naturally be in the top 8. The rewards for the top 8 were quite generous, mainly in gold dragon coins. Kong Xinmu had asked before. After Ran Ran obtained 2nd place in the 4th grade disciple ranking, she had received a lot of gold dragon coins and cultivation resources. Moreover, after returning, the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land had given Ran Ran even more generous rewards. In the future, Ran Ran's cultivation environment would definitely be much better than the others. Kong Xinmu didn't think too much about it. No matter what the rewards were, the more the better. Right now, he was in urgent need of cultivation resources and gold dragon coins, all for the sake of unsealing the 12 layers of the Starry Sky Minor World. The amount of cultivation resources that would be consumed during this period was unimaginable to ordinary people. Putting everything else aside, Kong Xinmu had only unlocked 2 layers of the seal. If he wanted to unlock the 3rd layer of the seal, he might not be able to just rely on the rewards from the Holy Land competition. However, he might be able to do it. It all depended on how far Kong Xinmu could go. Kong Xinmu was determined to get the 1st place among the 5th class disciples. Soon, the white light reappeared. Everyone was teleported to the small world where the next battle would take place. Kong Xinmu opened his eyes and transformed into his pitch-black mystical dragon form. He saw that his opponent was not one of the people he had been paying attention to. Instead, it was an inconspicuous young girl. This girl's expression was cold. It was unknown which Holy Land she came from. In short, her strength was quite good. At the very least, it made Kong Xinmu feel some pressure. Of course, it was impossible to defeat Kong Xinmu. Among the 5th class disciples, Kong Xinmu was without a doubt the first. On the other side, Yi Yin appeared in the small world. He fixed his eyes on the person in front of him. It was one of the most powerful people among the 5th class disciples, Long Hua. Long Hua sneered when she saw Yi Yin. "You're Yi Yin. Tell me about Kong Xinmu's combat strength. I'll give you something you'll be satisfied with later." He remembered that Yi Yin and Kong Xinmu seemed to have some interaction. They had challenged the Dragon Soul Golem together and came out together. As the first person among the 5th class disciples in the Heavenly Frost Holy Land, he had been famous for a long time. Moreover, his father was a powerful person in the Heavenly Frost Holy Land. Therefore, Long Hua had the attitude of being in a high position and looking down on all living beings. To him, Kong Xinmu was a threatening opponent. Therefore, he wanted to get more information about Kong Xinmu from Yi Yin. Unfortunately, upon hearing Long Hua's words, the corners of Yi Yin's mouth curled up, and he simply ignored her. Tell them about Kong Xinmu's methods? Yi Yin sneered in his heart. Not to mention the fact that he didn't even know what Jiang Xinwu's methods were and how he could deal with him. Even if he did know, so what? Why should he tell Long Hua all this? Long Hua had a strong background, but Yi Yin wasn't weak either. Yi Yin was a lone hidden killer dragon from the Hidden Death Holy Land. He was the first among the 5th class disciples in the Hidden Death Holy Land. He had once obtained a Heaven and Earth Holy item from a mid-level relic with his own strength. He was a big shot in the Hidden Death Holy Land, and his master was a supreme expert in the Hidden Death Holy Land. How could such an existence bow to Long Hua? Not to mention that he didn't want to betray Kong Xinmu, Even if he didn't have any relationship with Kong Shin-mu, he couldn't be bothered with Long Hua's request. What, you're not moved? Long Hua sneered when he saw Yi Yin's lips curl up. He was extremely angry. Then scram. Long Hua did not hesitate and immediately transformed into a heavenly snow frost dragon. The heavenly snow frost dragon was an extremely powerful ice attribute divine dragon bloodline. At this moment, the entire place was covered in white snow. One had to know that this was a plain area. It was originally sunny, but when Long Hua attacked, the entire place was covered in white snow. Yi Yin's figure immediately disappeared. Dragon Flower felt as if she had been choked, and the snow and ice around her began to drift aimlessly as if she had lost her target. However, Long Hua was not worried. Instead, he laughed coldly. The snow and ice exploded in the air. No matter where Yi Yin hid, although Long Hua could not detect his presence, Long Hua still had the ability to attack the entire place. As the snow and ice exploded, Long Hua had already sensed Yi Yin's location. Yi Yin's concealment ability had lost its effect in this situation. However, the moment his figure was exposed, he launched an explosive attack, and the ultra-divine dragon martial technique that he had just cultivated erupted wildly. Countless black streams of light swept out from the void, turning into meteors that attacked Long Hua. Long Hua, who had transformed into a heavenly snow frost dragon, raised her dragon claws slightly, and an ice barrier appeared. This was the ultra-divine dragon skill, and it had been cultivated to the saint level. The saint-level ice barrier, coupled with Long Hua being a transcendent god level 2 expert, made it impossible for Yi Yin to break through her defense. The next moment, the snow and ice exploded. Yi Yin had nowhere to hide and was directly injured, but he did not give up. After all, this was a fight for the top 10. I'll give you one more chance. Tell me Kong Shin-mu's weakness, Long Hua said condescendingly. Long Hua said condescendingly, after this is done, I will give you 1,000,000 gold dragon coins as compensation. 1,000,000 gold dragon coins was not a small amount. But Yi Yin could not be bothered with him. Even if he told him Kong Shin-mu's weakness, Long Hua was definitely not a match for Kong Shin-mu. Then what was the point of saying it? Chapter 51-25. Long Hua was furious. However, he could tell that it was impossible for Yi Yin to point out Kong Shin-mu's weakness. 1,000,000 gold dragon coins was not a small sum to him. Since Yi Yin still did not accept it, he could not raise the price any further. Moreover, in Long Hua's mind, he was a second-stage transcendent god. It was unlikely that he would be a match for Kong Shin-mu. He asked a few more questions to make sure that nothing went wrong. After all, the first place among the 5th grade disciples was very important to Long Hua. The top 3 in each grade were all super powerful beings. In the future, they would definitely become big shots in the great world of the dragon gods. Therefore, Long Hua did not want to let go of this opportunity. Yin-yang chaotic heaven's cold explosion. With this thought, Long Hua did not give Yi Yin any chance. This move was the transcendent divine dragon martial technique that he had cultivated to the extreme saint realm, and it was also his strongest technique at the moment. With this move, Yi Yin, who could not hide or dodge, had no way of blocking it. With a rumble, the world froze over and then exploded. Yi Yin's divine dragon body exploded into pieces. Then, he appeared outside the hall of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. He had failed. He had lost to Long Hua of the Heavenly Frost Holy Land. However, Yi Yin was not too conflicted. He quickly regrouped and prepared for the next match. Because he was a loser in the top 16, he could still fight for the top 10. After Yi Yin was eliminated, Long Hua won and entered the top 8. As for Jiang Shenwu, he had also defeated the cold-faced girl and entered the top 8. The indifferent girl was not weak, but unfortunately, her opponent was Kong Shin-mu. Defeat was the only result. In the hall, there were only 8 people left. Kong Shin-mu, Long Hua, and Fu Wenhao were all among them. However, both Long Hua and Fu Wenhao regarded Kong Shin-mu as their most important opponent, because they felt that Kong Shin-mu was the strongest among the remaining people. And Kong Shin-mu did not care much. Soon, the white light flashed again. The competition for the quarterfinals had finally begun. Kong Shin-mu was transported to a small world. What appeared in front of him was not Long Hua or Fu Wenhao, but a burly man. This fellow. His defense was very strong. Kong Shinmu's heart skipped a beat and his expression turned solemn. However, it was only a little serious. The current Kong Shinmu was not someone these fifth-grade disciples could shake. "Oh, little brother, your strength is not bad. Apart from you, the remaining 8 people have inherited the divine dragon's blood essence." The burly man laughed. "Good luck." In fact, the burly man was under a lot of pressure because he was very clear about Kong Shinmu's strength. Kong Shinmu's defense was even stronger than his. The burly man was already at the first level of the Transcendent God stage, but he was still no match for Kong Shinmu's defense. Moreover, Kong Shinmu's attack power seemed very strong. "Thank you. Good luck too." Kong Shinmu smiled slightly and then transformed into a black divine dragon. The other party transformed into a giant khaki-colored divine dragon. One must know that the super divine dragon's body was larger than the dragon emperor's. At this moment, the other party transformed into a divine dragon's body, and a tyrannical pressure immediately came toward him. Kong Shinmu acted as if he did not feel the pressure at all and directly attacked the other party. 9th Stage Extreme Dao Dragon Explosion. 33 Divine Feathers. Jiang Shenwu continued to erupt with 9th Stage Extreme Dao Water Dragon Explosion. He also used the power of the 33 Divine Feathers to erupt with 81 Dark Dragon Breaths that rumbled out and attacked the Earth Attribute Dragon. The other party did not intend to counterattack, but began to defend. To the other party, defense was his forte. He would then find Kong Shinmu's flaws and kill him in one blow. Therefore, the other party did not intend to counterattack directly. Instead, he wanted to defend against Kong Shinmu's attacks. With his defense, Kong Shinmu really could not break through it. However, Kong Shinmu did not give up. Instead, he continued to use the 9th Ultimate Dragon Burst. At the same time, Kong Shinmu's 33 Divine Feathers also continuously absorbed the surrounding power, gradually becoming more powerful. Of course, Kong Shinmu hid this and did not expose it. It wasn't until Jiang Shenwu used the 9th Stage Ultimate Dao Hui Dragon Explosion several times that the effects of the 33 Heavens Divine Feathers had accumulated to the peak. But the other party still did not notice the threat of Kong Shinmu. Then, Kong Shinmu suddenly erupted. Ultimate Sky Might Dragon Soul. The Dragon Soul of Extreme Destruction Heaven's Might, combined with the 33 Heavens Divine Plume, directly erupted and condensed into 33 black dragon souls in the void beside Jiang Shenwu. Such a scene immediately caused the surrounding power of heaven and earth to become chaotic and turbulent. The power of heaven and earth in the void was absorbed and swallowed by the black dragon souls. This is the super divine dragon technique? The burly dragon martialist with the earth attribute was a little stunned. He thought to himself, wasn't Kong Shinmu just a peak emperor rank? How did he cultivate such a super divine dragon technique? Moreover, the power of this super divine dragon technique was a little terrifying. In the first wave, the 33 black dragon souls erupted with dragon breath beams at almost the same time. The pitch-black light shot out and swept towards the burly dragon martialist. The burly dragon martialist's defense was very strong, but at this moment, he was a little shocked. This was because Kong Shinmu's 33 black dragon souls erupted at the same time, increasing the power of the ultimate Sky Might Dragon Soul by about 33 times. Moreover, Kong Shinmu had the power of devouring. The power of a single black dragon soul was already equivalent to the super divine dragon technique at the extreme sage realm. Now, the super divine dragon technique that surpassed the extreme sage realm was attacking the other party. Again, the second wave. The first wave of attacks did not break through the burly dragon martialist's defense. After all, the defensive barrier of the earth attribute was still very strong. However, immediately after, the 33 black dragon souls erupted again. The second wave of attacks was even more ferocious than the first. Its power was almost twice as strong as the first wave. It was almost at the level of Ultimate God Stage 2 as it swept over. The burly dragon martialist's defensive barrier instantly shattered. Immediately after, before he had time to form a new defensive barrier, the 33 black dragon souls had already attacked again. This time, the attack was even stronger, reaching the level of Ultimate God Stage 3. Most importantly, the burly dragon martialist's defensive barrier was almost unable to withstand the 33 simultaneous attacks. With a loud bang, it shattered again. Immediately after, the burly dragon martialist's entire body was annihilated. Chapter 51-26. Top 4. Kong Shin-mu defeated the strong dragon warrior and successfully entered the top 4. Now, it could be confirmed that he was one of the strongest 4 among the 5th-class disciples in all the Holy Lands. However, Kong Shin-mu did not think it was a big deal. After all, his goal was not the 5th-class disciples, but the 6th-class disciples. The 5th-class disciples who won first place were qualified to challenge the 6th-class disciples in the top 100. Step by step, they would try to become the first among the 6th-class disciples. This was the real glory, and it was what Kong Shin-mu really wanted to fight for this time. So, Kong Shin-mu did not feel satisfied with his current achievements. And among the top 4, there was also Kong Shin-mu, Fu Wenhao, Long Hua, and an innocent girl. Kong Shin-mu did not know that innocent girl. The dragon god's world was too big, too vast, and there were too many geniuses in all the Holy Lands. It was impossible for Kong Shin-mu to know everyone. So, the remaining 4 people were not familiar with each other. But Kong Shin-mu seemed to be the opponent that Fu Wenhao and Long Hua valued the most. Kong Shin-mu, I hope my next opponent is you. Long Hua said lightly to Kong Shin-mu. Kong Shin-mu just glanced at him and did not speak. Then a white light flashed. After the white light flashed, Kong Shin-mu opened his eyes and found that the one who appeared in front of him was Fu Wenhao from the Heaven's Wing Holy Land. Fu Wenhao's strength was obvious to all. He was the number 1 among the 5th-class disciples in the Heaven's Wing Holy Land, and could even be a 6th-class disciple. At this moment, he had become Kong Shin-mu's opponent. And Fu Wenhao looked very proud. But in fact, he was quite vigilant. Fu Wenhao was very cautious against Kong Shin-mu, an opponent who could reach this stage as a peak emperor level. Dragon transformation. Kong Shin-mu and Fu Wenhao, both almost at the same time, transformed into dragons. Then, both attacked almost at the same time. 9th stage Extreme Dao Dragon Explosion. Kong Shin-mu's 9 divine dragon breaths burst forth, while Fu Wenhao used his own strength to condense countless heavenly wings, gathering strong winds and forming several tornadoes that charged towards Kong Shin-mu. The small world where they were fighting was above a mountain range that stretched as far as the eye could see. Moreover, it was a volcanic mountain range. Below, flames continued to erupt, and the surrounding temperature was extremely high. As a result, the heavenly wing tornado that Fu Wenhao had created turned into a flaming tornado that sucked in countless lava flames. It looked like the destructive power was extremely terrifying. When it collided with Kong Shin-mu's 9-stage Extreme Dao Hui Dragon Burst, it swept up Kong Shin-mu's Hui Dragon Burst and shattered it. This Fu Wenhao is indeed very strong. Kong Shin-mu thought. Immediately after, it changed into a defensive stance. Curtain of Despair. Divine Astral Dragon Incantation. Kong Shin-mu's body-refining dragon skill and defensive dragon skill were activated almost at the same time. Then, the opponent's heavenly wings tornado, carrying with it an endless amount of molten flames, bombarded Jiang Shenwu's God Shield. As the power surged, the wind rippled in all directions. Kong Shin-mu's Curtain of Despair and God Shield were almost undamaged. Ha! Fu Wenhao's expression changed. He did not expect Kong Shin-mu to have such a terrifying defensive ability. That must be a super god-level dragon skill, right? Why was Kong Shin-mu, a peak royal stage martial artist, able to use it? This was not right. Moreover, that super divine dragon skill was able to block his attack? It seems that this Kong Shin-mu really needs me to use my full strength. Fu Wenhao sneered, and then the heavenly wings on his body swept up. There was a total of 6 pairs of gale heavenly wings. At this moment, they condensed behind his divine dragon body. Rampage. Along with his 2 transcendent god dragon weapons, he had completely merged with his transcendent god dragon weapon. He had almost reached the pinnacle of the transcendent god stage level 1. Even among the grade 6 disciples, he was extremely powerful and could even easily defeat an ordinary grade 6 disciple. The wind was piercingly cold, and the wind was raging. The heavenly wings condensed the lava flames around them and attacked Kong Shin-mu together. They arrived with a loud bang. The terrifying power was almost equivalent to the attack of an ordinary stage 4 transcendent god. However, Kong Shin-mu's Curtain of Despair and God's Shield did not waver in the slightest. At the same time, Kong Shin-mu even used the extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul. The 9 dragon souls appeared around him and began to absorb and devour the surrounding power. Then, they attacked Fu Wenhao. This is too comfortable. When these 3 super divine dragon skills are used at the same time, I don't even need to do anything extra. I just need to wait. Anyway, his opponent could not break through Kong Shinmu's defense. Then, the extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul would become stronger and stronger until his opponent could not withstand the attack and was defeated. It was too simple. Kong Shinmu's black dragon body did not move in mid-air. All the power of Fu Wenhao's attack was blocked by the Curtain of Despair and God's Shield when it reached Kong Shinmu. Then, Kong Shinmu's extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul's attack became more and more threatening to Fu Wenhao. At first, Fu Wenhao could block it easily. However, soon, Fu Wenhao began to use some tricks and used the super divine dragon weapon. He even had to think of ways to avoid it because he could not block it head-on. Until Kong Shinmu's extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul reached the strength of a stage 4 transcendent god. Fu Wenhao did not dare to take such a strong attack casually. Although his own attack was of this strength, it did not mean that he could withstand his own attack. Fu Wenhao was not a defensive type. Compared to Kong Shinmu, his defense was not as good as Kong Shinmu's, and his attack was not as good as Kong Shinmu's. Kong Shinmu's extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul quickly absorbed the surrounding power of heaven and earth and exploded with power that was comparable to a stage 4 transcendent god. And Fu Wenhao could not block it. The extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul's attack became stronger and stronger. Moreover, there were a total of 9 extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Souls, which meant that there were 9 attacks at the same time. It was equivalent to Fu Wenhao fighting 1 against 9. Not too much time had passed. Fu Wenhao had consumed a lot of energy, and the energy in his body was almost depleted. He kept using the space travel dragon martial technique to avoid the attacks of Kong Shinmu's dragon soul, but it was too much. He tried to find Kong Shinmu's flaws, but no matter what he did, even if he used all the power of the super divine dragon weapon, he could not do anything to Kong Shinmu's 2 defenses. Kong Shinmu had cultivated many body-tempering dragon martial techniques, and the defense of the God Shield was related to the strength of the divine dragon's body. In addition to the guardian's stance, Kong Shinmu's defense was now impregnable. Chapter 51-27. Fu Wenhao did not feel good. Was he being crushed? His attacks could not break through Kong Shinmu's defense, but he had to constantly dodge Kong Shinmu's attacks. Otherwise, he would be hit and defeated. He could feel that the attacks released by Kong Shinmu's extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul were getting stronger and stronger. It was like 9 turrets. How could he fight this? Kong Shinmu was locked in the defensive barrier like a tortoise. He's only a pinnacle emperor level. Why does he have such strong defense and attack abilities? It's one thing to be able to cultivate the super mystical dragon technique, but the super mystical dragon technique that he has cultivated seems to have reached the level of the supreme sage realm. Fu Wenhao was truly shocked. He could not believe it, but the truth was right in front of him. He started to think about the consequences of this defeat. Without a doubt, he had already missed the top 2 places. He could still fight for 3rd place. On the other side, who would win between Long Hua and that pure girl? Fu Wenhao did not have the time to think so much. His mind was in a mess. He felt that Kong Shinmu was already so strong that he was not on the same level as him. It was as if he was facing an opponent at the 5th level of the transcendent god. It was too terrifying and despairing. In reality, Kong Shinmu's super mystical dragon technique had not reached the level of the supreme sage realm. How could he be so fast? The reason why Fu Wenhao felt that his super mystical dragon technique had reached the level of the supreme sage realm was because of the combination of many aspects. For example, the power of the extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul had indeed reached the level of the supreme sage realm. However, that was because Kong Shinmu had the help of the devouring power, which was equivalent to increasing his absorption ability by several times. Another example was the defense of the despair canopy. It was not that strong. However, the key was that the despair canopy and the God Shield were completely fused. The defense of the God Shield had been enhanced by Kong Shinmu's many body-refining dragon techniques and had transformed to a terrifying level. It could completely block the attack of an ordinary 5th-level supreme god. Therefore, now that Fu Wenhao had unleashed the attack of a 4th-level supreme god, it was naturally unable to pose any threat to Kong Shinmu. Finally, Fu Wenhao couldn't withstand Kong Shinmu's attacks. When his strength was almost depleted, the extreme annihilating Heaven's Might Dragon Soul gave him the final fatal blow. This Dragon Soul Fortress is so powerful. Even Kong Shinmu himself was shocked. The might of the extreme destruction Heaven's Might Dragon Soul, coupled with the devouring power, was truly strong to a certain extent. If he reached the transcendent god level and cultivated the extreme destructive Heaven's Might Dragon Soul to the extreme saint realm, what kind of terrifying technique would that be? Once the fort appeared, it would be able to control the universe. After the white light flashed, Kong Shinmu returned to the hall of the Dragon Soul Tower. The person he was facing was actually that pure young girl. In other words, Long Hua had actually lost the battle between this pure young girl and Long Hua. Hello, I am Bai Yuxuan from the Silver Moon Holy Land. The pure girl smiled politely at Kong Shinmu. Her smile was very sweet, making people feel that she was very approachable. However, to be able to reach this stage, she was definitely the number one among the grade 5 disciples of the Silver Moon Holy Land. She was definitely a top-notch genius of the Silver Moon Holy Land. Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu nodded and smiled politely. He did not expect that Long Hua was actually not a match for this pure young girl, Bai Yuxuan. Bai Yuxuan was clearly only at Transcendent God Level 1, while Long Hua was at Transcendent God Level 2. In this case, Long Hua and Fu Wenhao would have to fight for third place. Meanwhile, Kong Shinmu and the young girl Bai Yuxuan would fight for first place among the grade 5 disciples. There was not much time for them to prepare. After the white light flashed, both of them were transported to a small world. This was above the sea, where the undercurrent was surging. Furthermore, the sea level was still rising. This meant that when the two of them fought, they would likely be submerged in the sea. Fighting in the sea. This kind of environment naturally did not have much of an effect on the dragon warrior. Regardless of whether it was Kong Shinmu or Bai Yuxuan, the environment and terrain did not matter. After all, Kong Shinmu was of the darkness attribute and Bai Yuxuan was of the light attribute. This environment did not affect either of them much. I'm making my move. Bai Yuxuan transformed into a Holy Light Silver Moon Dragon. The Holy Light Silver Moon Dragon was an extremely powerful divine dragon bloodline with the light attribute. At this moment, even above the sea, a dazzling light was released. This light seemed to be real and made Kong Shinmu feel a burning effect. Impressive. She launched an attack without any warning. With a thought, Kong Shinmu activated his defensive form. Guardian Stance. Canopy of Despair. Divinity Shield. Kong Shinmu consecutively released a defensive technique that was like an iron wall and blocked all of Bai Yuxuan's power. She could not threaten him at all. Immediately after, Bai Yuxuan's divine dragon revealed a grave expression. It was obvious that the strength of Kong Shinmu's defense exceeded her expectations. She then used several attacks and even used her super divine dragon weapon, but she could not break through Kong Shinmu's defense. Silver Moon Massacre. Left with no other choice, Bai Yuxuan could only use her trump card. Since it was already the final battle, whoever won would be number one among the 5th class disciples. Therefore, Bai Yuxuan would not hide her trump card anymore. The true strength of the Silver Moon Holy Ground lay in the Silver Moon Massacre, or rather, a powerful dragon martial technique similar to this move. This was a terrifying dragon martial technique that even surpassed space. It could ignore space and cause damage to the opponent. Long Hua was defeated by this move. As soon as the Silver Moon Massacre was used, silver light shone brightly in the field. Then, Kong Shinmu felt that his outer layer of defense was useless. Whether it was the Canopy of Despair or the God's Shield, they did not stop the other party's attack at all. As for his pitch-black divine dragon body, he felt a tyrannical killing power. The terrifying power was accompanied by the radiance of the silver moon and the aura of massacre. This was a killer move that transcended space and time. No wonder Long Hua lost. Kong Shinmu's lips curled up slightly. The other party's killer move was too powerful. However, the attack power of this killer move was only around the level of an ordinary transcendent stage 3. Against someone like Long Hua who did not cultivate a body-tempering dragon martial technique, it was naturally easy to defeat her. However, against Kong Shinmu, it was still difficult to achieve. Of course, apart from the super divine dragon martial technique, the defense of Kong Shinmu's black dragon body was not very strong. At the very least, it had not reached the level of a transcendent stage 4. Therefore, the opponent's Silver Moon Massacre still caused considerable damage to Kong Shin Mu. However, Kong Shin Mu recovered quickly. Devouring Power. Dark Dragon Imperial Filth Skill. Chapter 51-28. The dragon scales of Kong Shin Mu's black dragon body were burnt to a crisp by the Silver Moon slaughter. However, under the effects of the Dark Dragon Filth Mastery and the Devouring Power, they recovered rapidly. At the same time, Kong Shin Mu also started to unleash his strongest attack. The 33 Sky Divine Feathers hadn't been unleashed to its full extent yet. However, Kong Shin Mu directly used the 9 layers Ultimate Flood Dragon Burst and then used the 33 Sky Divine Feathers to unleash 9 layers of attacks. A total of 81 layers of Flood Dragon Burst swept towards the white dragon that Bai Yuxuan had transformed into. The deep sea had already risen. 81 black dragon breaths broke through the waves and attacked Bai Yuxuan, covering almost every direction that she could dodge. However, Bai Yuxuan wasn't the slightest bit afraid. She didn't panic at all. She directly shuttled through the void and appeared in a completely different direction. Kong Shin Mu's 81 layers of Flood Dragon Burst completely missed. However, Kong Shin Mu wasn't in a hurry. He didn't move at all. With the effects of the Dark Dragon Filth Mastery and the Devouring Power, his recovery speed was very fast. He was almost fully recovered. However, at this time, Bai Yuxuan's Silver Moon slaughter swept over again. Similarly, it ignored space and landed on Kong Shin Mu's black dragon body. However, this time, the opponent's attack wasn't as strong as before. First, it was because Kong Shin Mu was already on guard. Second, it was because Kong Shin Mu had just devoured the opponent's light attribute power. Now, his resistance to light attribute power had greatly increased. 9 layers Ultimate Flood Dragon Burst. Kong Shin Mu didn't hesitate and directly continued to attack. He also coordinated with the 33 Sky Divine Feathers' 9 layers of attacks. 81 Flood Dragon Bursts shot out explosively in the surroundings. Bai Yuxuan was almost still using the method of shuttling through the void to dodge. She wasn't even touched by the Flood Dragon Burst at all. But if that's the case, she must have used up a lot of her energy. Kong Shin Mu wasn't in a hurry, and continued to use the 9-stage Extreme Dragon Blast. Every time, he used the Divine Feathers of the 33 Heavens to launch a 9-layered attack. This allowed the 33 Heavens Divine Feathers to continuously absorb energy, advancing towards its peak state. Of course, during this period, Jiang Shenwu had almost erupted with the 9 layers of the Extreme Dao Hui Dragon Explosion several times. He did not hit Bai Yuxuan even once. However, Bai Yuxuan continued to dodge and expended a lot of energy. Unfortunately, she was at the level of a first-stage transcendent god. She had quite a lot of energy, so it was almost impossible for her to completely exhaust her energy. Kong Shin Mu did not care. Bai Yuxuan was still using Silver Moon Slaughter to attack Kong Shin Mu. Unfortunately, her attacks were getting weaker and weaker, giving her a bad feeling. All along, when facing dragon martial artists of the same rank, Bai Yuxuan had always won with a huge advantage. Even when facing the famous Long Hua, who was a level higher than her in cultivation, she still easily defeated Long Hua. But now, Kong Shin Mu was a level lower than her. This made Bai Yuxuan extremely curious about Kong Shin Mu. It was obvious that Kong Shin Mu had a very special power, but she did not know what it was. Even if she used the Transcendent Divine Dragon Weapon, used the strongest Silver Moon Slaughter on Kong Shin Mu, and even activated the effects of the brilliant materials, she could not hurt Kong Shin Mu too much. Kong Shin Mu's Divine Dragon Body was too strong, and the defense of the Divine Dragon Body was even stronger. To Bai Yuxuan, this was an invulnerable stance. My attack power is still too weak. Bai Yuxuan was a little disappointed. However, it was also very difficult for Kong Shin Mu to defeat her. Because Bai Yuxuan could see that Kong Shin Mu's 9-stage Extreme Dao Roaring Dragon Explosion did not seem to be able to lock onto her position. She could completely avoid any of Kong Shin Mu's attacks. In this situation where both sides could not do anything to each other, she could consider fighting a battle of attrition with Kong Shin Mu. After all, her Transcendent Divine Dragon Weapon had another effect, and that was the Spectral Energy Battle Runes. It could help her recover the energy that she had expended. In this case, she might be able to win a battle of attrition with Kong Shin Mu. In her opinion, Kong Shin Mu would definitely consume a lot of energy to recover from his injuries. What a pity. She guessed completely wrong. Kong Shinmu's recovery would not consume much energy at all. On the contrary, by using the devouring power to continuously devour her energy, he would be able to make up for his weakness, allowing him to always be at his peak state. Furthermore, Kong Shinmu did not intend to really fight a battle of attrition with her. Just as Bai Yuxuan was constantly evading Kong Shinmu's attacks and finding time to attack Kong Shinmu suddenly erupted. The 33 Heavens divine feathers had already accumulated a great amount of power. Immediately after, Kong Shinmu erupted with the most terrifying transcendent divine dragon martial technique. Extreme Destruction Heavenly Might Dragon Soul. The Extreme Destruction Heavenly Might Dragon Soul directly appeared, and pitch-black dragon soul forts appeared around Kong Shinmu. Furthermore, there were a total of 33 forts. The moment the 33 Extreme Destruction Heavenly Might Dragon Souls appeared, they started to absorb and devour the surrounding energy, and then attacked Bai Yuxuan. Each attack was a fraction stronger than the previous one. Bai Yuxuan did not feel much pressure at the start. But very soon, she discovered that the 33 Extreme Destruction Heavenly Might Dragon Souls attacks were getting faster and faster, and the power was getting stronger and stronger, until she could barely stay in one place for a breath of time. She had to constantly change her position in order to not be attacked by the opponent. But very soon, as she continued to dodge, she discovered that the 33 Extreme Destruction Heavenly Might Dragon Souls attacks had actually reached the level of a Transcendent Divine Stage 4 attack. Wasn't this too terrifying? These dragon souls were almost like forts that were getting stronger and stronger. These forts could not do anything to her. After all, she had cultivated a rather nimble movement-type Transcendent Divine Dragon martial technique. But while she was dodging, she was constantly consuming energy, and very soon, she did not have much energy left. Damn it! Bai Yuxuan originally thought that she could win against Kong Shinmu. But she did not expect that this Kong Shinmu would be so powerful. However, she was not too disappointed. After all, as she had expected, how could it be that easy to obtain the first place among the grade 5 disciples? There were too many talented geniuses in the world. And there were many people who were luckier than her. It was normal that Kong Shinmu was stronger than her. However, Bai Yuxuan still smiled and said, Kong Shinmu, you are very powerful. But you seem to lack the ability to chase. If we hadn't met in this kind of situation, you wouldn't have been able to catch up to me, and there would have been no victor between us. Was that so? When Kong Shinmu heard this, he smiled lightly. He did not refute. But in his heart, he was very clear. If they hadn't met in this kind of situation, then Bai Yuxuan would not have been a match for him. This was because he could use the power of the Starry Sky Inheritance in the outside world. Once the power of the Starry Sky Inheritance could be used, Kong Shinmu would be able to trap her directly. In terms of the understanding of the spatial attribute power of the void, under the same level, who could compare to Kong Shinmu? Chapter 5400. Kong Shinmu did not answer Bai Yuxuan's words. However, the 33 dragon soul forts that he had condensed were still attacking Bai Yuxuan. Even Kong Shinmu felt that his dragon martial technique was too shameless. It was simply not giving him a way out. However, the stronger the technique, the more comfortable Kong Shinmu felt. This meant that he would be even stronger in the future. Not long after, Bai Yuxuan's energy was exhausted. Originally, she could have continued fighting for at least a few hours. However, under the situation where she was being chased by Kong Shinmu, her energy was being depleted too quickly. She did not have a chance to catch her breath at all. When her energy was exhausted, Kong Shinmu's extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul had already devoured the attack strength of a 5th stage transcendent god. The next moment, the silver divine dragon that Bai Yuxuan had transformed into was surrounded by seawater and was blasted into pieces by Kong Shinmu's extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul's dragon breath attack. In the end, he won. After the white light, Kong Shinmu appeared in the hall of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Moreover, the 128 people who had entered the finals had all come to this hall. There was still no one else in the hall. However, everyone was feeling a little complicated. That was because everyone's ranking had basically been determined after a series of battles. Long Hua and Fu Wenhao were also feeling complicated. Long Hua was about to cry. When he fought with Bai Yuxuan, he unexpectedly lost, and most importantly, when he fought with Fu Wenhao for the 3rd place, he actually lost to Fu Wenhao. In fact, Long Hua was not particularly strong. His talent was average, and he had only been able to cultivate to his current level by relying on his father's strength and providing him with sufficient cultivation resources. Compared to real geniuses like Fu Wenhao and Bai Yuxuan, he naturally could not compare. In particular, Long Hua finally understood that Kong Xinmu had actually defeated Bai Yuxuan. That was too terrifying, right? Bai Yuxuan had already made Long Hua feel terrified. However, she did not expect that Kong Xinmu could actually defeat Bai Yuxuan. He was a real fifth-stage disciple. Number 1. Next, it was time for the rewards. Kong Xinmu ranked first among the fifth-class disciples. When the Dragon Soul Holy Tower announced this, a golden radiance shrouded Kong Xinmu's head. At the same time, Kong Xinmu received a storage pendant. Inside the storage pendant was Kong Xinmu's reward. Kong Xinmu observed for a moment. There were 10 million golden dragon coins or cultivation resources of equivalent value inside the pendant. These were the rewards given by the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Once he returned to the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land, he would definitely receive even more rewards. Unfortunately, these rewards added up were not enough for Kong Xinmu to unlock 1 or 2 layers of the Starry Sky Pocket World seal. In any case, he had brought glory to the holy lands of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice this time. Furthermore, he had obtained quite a lot of cultivation resources. If he were to carry out any other operation, it would have taken at least a few months for Kong Xinmu to accumulate so many golden dragon coins. But now, he had obtained so much in just 3 days. In Kong Xinmu's experience, it seemed like close to a month had passed. In reality, only 3 days had passed in the outside world. The Dragon Soul Holy Tower's methods were truly unpredictable. After the golden radiance enveloped Kong Xinmu, the silvery white radiance also enveloped Bai Yuxuan from the Silver Moon Holy Land. Bai Yuxuan was ranked second. She obtained a reward of 5 million golden dragon coins. Moreover, she obtained quite a number of points. This caused the Silver Moon Holy Land's overall ranking to rise by more than 10 places, reaching 9th place. As for the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land that Kong Xinmu was from, it suddenly leaped to 2nd place. The 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land obtained good results in both the 4th class and 5th class disciples. This meant that the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land had nurtured outstanding geniuses in these 2 levels. Ran Ran and Kong Xinmu could be said to have taken the lead this time. When they returned to the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land, Kong Xinmu's limelight would definitely be unparalleled. However, he didn't plan on returning to the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land yet. He wanted to participate in the 6th class disciple battle. The process was naturally the same as the 5th class disciple battle. He just had to assume the identity of a 6th class disciple and join the ranks of the 6th class disciples for another round. Kong Xinmu wasn't the only one who wanted to do such a thing. However, only the first place had the qualifications to do so. Therefore, Long Hua and Fu Wenhao could be said to be rather furious now. They originally wanted to participate in the 6th class disciple battle. Unfortunately, the first place was taken by Kong Xinmu and they lost their qualifications. Otherwise, there would probably be countless Dragon Soul Holy Tower students wanting to participate in the next stage of the competition. How could the Dragon Soul Holy Tower possibly let this happen? 3rd place, Fu Wenhao. 4th place, Long Hua. The points and rewards for the top 3 were great, but the 4th place was much worse. However, what Long Hua lacked wasn't this bit of reward. She lacked points and glory. Unfortunately, this glory was snatched away by Kong Xinmu. The next 5 to 10 places belonged to different holy lands. Yi Yin, from the Hidden Death Holy Land, obtained the 9th place this time. In other words, he was the strongest among those who failed to advance to the next 8. He had to fight his way to the 9th place. However, he also knew that he couldn't go any further. Because the 8th place was that burly dragon martial artist with super strong defense. Yi Yin knew that opponents with strong defense like this were the most troublesome for him. Fortunately, Kong Xinmu wasn't his match. Otherwise, he would have been eliminated earlier. Of course, the Dragon Soul Holy Tower generally wouldn't let the powerful dragon martial artists meet in advance. From the first round to the second round and the challenge of the Dragon Soul Golem, the Dragon Soul Holy Tower basically estimated everyone's strength. They basically wouldn't let the powerful martial artists meet in advance. Otherwise, the ranking would be unfair. In any case, the 5th class disciple battle was finally over. Next was the 6th class disciple battle. Among the 6th class disciples, there were quite a number of people that Kong Xinmu was familiar with. Gu Xinyue was a 6th class disciple at the pinnacle of the Dragon Emperor. Moreover, she wouldn't choose to break through in a short period of time. At the very least, she would wait until she and Kong Xinmu finished exploring the intermediate ruins. Apart from her, there were also Feng Ligei, Yu Tianchong, and Gu Yusheng. The 3 girls were also 6th class disciples. However, they were all 2nd stage Supreme God experts now. Although Kong Xinmu could easily fight 4th stage Supreme God experts now, that was Kong Xinmu. Among the 6th class disciples, Feng Ligei, Yu Tianchong, and Gu Yusheng were already considered top-notch experts. They all had the combat power of an ordinary 3rd stage Supreme God. Chapter 5401. After the 5th class disciple competition ended, everyone dispersed. Only Kong Xinmu did not return to the 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Ground. That was because he had decided to participate in the 6th class disciple competition and just wait in the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Obtaining the Dragon Soul and becoming a Dragon Soul Dragon Warrior might be an opportunity. And participating in the 6th class disciple competition is also an excellent opportunity. If necessary, I might choose to break through to the transcendent level during the competition. Once Kong Xinmu broke through to the transcendent level, he would be able to unleash at least the combat power of a transcendent god level 6. That was because breaking through to the transcendent level was a major breakthrough that could increase his strength to the next level. In addition to the Dragon Soldier Chen Xing and the 3 Super Divine Dragon skills, his power would increase greatly after he reached the transcendent level. Therefore, once Kong Xinmu broke through to the transcendent level, his overall strength would undoubtedly increase by 2 levels. In that case, he would even dare to try against a 7th class disciple, let alone a 6th class disciple. Of course, the strongest of the 7th class disciples was still too strong for the current Kong Xinmu. That was the peak of the Transcendent God level 6. Among the 7th class disciples, the strongest definitely had the combat power of a Transcendent God level 6. Therefore, Kong Xinmu was thinking too much. No matter what, he had to win the 6th class disciple competition first. This time, Jiang Xinwu participated in the same process again, and it could be said that he was familiar with it. During this period, he rested in the hall of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. The 6th class disciples kept gathering outside the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Compared to the 5th class disciples, their numbers were several times fewer. This was natural. In the entire Dragon God's world, it was in the shape and structure of a pyramid. The stronger one was, the fewer there were. This was the iron rule. No matter which race it was the same. The number of 5th class disciples was more than 10 times that of 6th class disciples. This was something that Kong Xinmu already knew. Therefore, for the 5th class disciples, the Dragon Soul Holy Tower opened a total of 800 small worlds for the first round of competition. And for the 6th class disciple competition this time, the Dragon Soul Holy Tower opened a total of 90 small worlds for the first round of competition. Their numbers were only about 1/10 of the 5th class disciples. However, the weakest of the 6th grade disciples were at the first level of the Transcendent God realm. The strongest were Transcendent God level 3. Many Transcendent God level 3 definitely had the power of Transcendent God level 5. Therefore, Kong Xinmu did not dare to say that he would be able to secure the first place among the 6th class disciples. All he knew was that he was much more familiar with the process of participating in the battle in the small world of 1,000 people. Kong Xinmu didn't have to wait too long. The 6th class disciples gathered very quickly. Then, the 1,000-man pocket dimension was constructed. Kong Xinmu started the challenge again. After gaining experience, Kong Xinmu felt even more relaxed. Although he was facing a 6th grade disciple this time, his methods had also improved. He found a 6th-tier disciple and defeated him, sending him out of the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower. Then, he gathered enough energy from the 33 Heavens Divine Plume and directly released it, forming 33 extreme destructive Heaven Might Dragon Souls. 33 Dragon Soul turrets appeared. Kong Xinmu was among the 33 Dragon Souls, waiting for the other Dragon Warriors to arrive. People kept coming and were defeated by Kong Xinmu. In the competition of the 5th class disciples, he had defeated the most opponents. And now it was still the same. He could create a commotion and make more and more Dragon Warriors approach him. Then, he would kill them and send them out of the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower. Of course, there were also some dragon warriors who were very cautious and did not easily approach after being attracted. However, Jiang Xinwu easily shuttled through the void, and while the other party wasn't paying attention, he launched a sneak attack and killed him. This time, Kong Xinmu, who was familiar with the rules, did not feel any pressure. Although he was facing a 6th-class disciple, Kong Xinmu, who had become stronger, did not find it difficult. It was still the same as before. Of course, some dragon warriors were not weak. After coming to Kong Xinmu's side, they could even destroy several of Kong Xinmu's dragon soul turrets. This kind of situation happened time and time again. This caused Jiang Xinwu to be a little more careful. This was because even the strongest among the 5th-class disciples would find it difficult to destroy his dragon soul turrets. But now, there were many dragon warriors who could destroy his extreme destructive Heaven Might Dragon Soul. After all, many of the 6th-class disciples were at the 3rd level of the Transcendent God Realm. There were still many who had the strength to challenge the 4th level of the Transcendent God Realm. Kong Xinmu's current attack and defense level were about the 4th level of the Transcendent God Realm. The extreme destructive Heaven Might Dragon Soul could become stronger and stronger, but it would at most reach the 5th level of the Transcendent God Realm. Those who dared to attack Kong Xinmu were definitely the strongest among the 6th-class disciples. Otherwise, the weaklings at the 1st and 2nd level of the Transcendent God Realm would basically hide and not let anyone find them. They wanted to live until the last moment. Therefore, it was normal for Kong Xinmu's extreme destructive Heaven Might Dragon Soul to be destroyed. Of course, Kong Xinmu was still steadily hunting the other 6th-class disciples. Even if they were opponents at the 3rd level of the Transcendent God Realm. When they saw that Kong Xinmu was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor's level, they thought that they had met their prey. Little did they know that they had met their hunter. Kong Xinmu's combat power far exceeded that of an ordinary 6th-class disciple. Only the strongest among the 6th-class disciples were qualified to fight with him. Nearly half a month had passed in the world of thousands. Kong Xinmu had killed 172 people. This time, he was even more ferocious than before. Moreover, as the world of thousands began to search and gather, the dragon warriors got closer and closer. Kong Xinmu's extreme destructive Heaven Might Dragon Soul became even more eye-catching. Experts kept coming over, and there were even some powerful 6th-class disciples who chose to join hands. This made Kong Xinmu feel the pressure. Many of these 6th-class disciples were people that Kong Xinmu could not defeat with just the strength of a dragon warrior. Now that they had joined hands, it was normal for Kong Xinmu to feel the pressure. Fortunately, Kong Xinmu's various methods were too strong. Even if the extreme destructive Heaven Might Dragon Soul was destroyed, he could easily escape, hide, and launch sneak attacks. There was simply no one who could resist his sneak attacks. After all, Kong Xinmu relied on the concealment ability of the Mo Wu beast to make it so that no one could find him. In fact, if Kong Xinmu wanted to survive until the end, it would be very easy. However, he wanted to defeat more opponents, so he did not use this ability. Now, only the perception ability of a 5th-level transcendent god could sense Kong Xinmu's existence and see through Kong Xinmu's concealment. Chapter 5402. The first round of the 6th-class disciples, the 1,000-man world chaotic battle, ended. Kong Xinmu once again entered the 2nd round with the result of killing the most enemies. At this moment, the ranking of the 5th-class disciples had already caused an uproar in the outside world. 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. 1st. Silver Moon Holy Land. 2nd. Fu Wenhao and Long Hua, who had been placed with high hopes, were ranked 3rd and 4th respectively. Many people sighed with regret. The few other Holy Lands that had wanted to play tricks on the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land, and wanted to suppress it had fallen to God knows where. Because only half of their disciples were allowed to participate in the trial of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Their total points had plummeted. Those who had been in the top 10 had now fallen to less than half. Although it was regrettable, who asked them to play tricks on such a matter? The first place of the 5th-class disciples made countless people speechless. Many people came to the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land to inquire about this person called Kong Xinmu. The results came out very quickly. He was actually the disciple of Emperor Shi, and he had previously gone to the Outer Realm Fortress to train. Even the war with the 4 major races had ended prematurely because of this Kong Xinmu, and it was the dragon gods who had won. This was simply a miraculous existence. Originally, very few people knew about Kong Shinmu's deeds. After all, not everyone would pay attention to such details. But after this time, Kong Shinmu's name spread throughout the world. The name Kong Shinmu could be said to be a legend in the dragon god's world recently. It was almost the same as Emperor Xi's. This made people sigh. A great teacher produces a great disciple. As expected of the disciple of Emperor Xi. At this time, someone revealed that this Kong Shinmu seemed to have chosen to participate in the competition of the 6th class disciples. This made countless people exclaim. Countless people began to guess what kind of results Kong Shinmu could obtain among the 6th class disciples. Could he enter the top 100? After all, in the eyes of ordinary people, the 5th class disciples and the 6th class disciples were two completely different levels. The 5th class disciples were mostly at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. However, a grade 6 disciple would at least have the fighting power of a transcendent god stage 1. As for the top grade 6 disciples, they had the combat power of a transcendent god stage 5. This was definitely a huge test for Kong Shinmu. Many of them went to the Silver Moon Holy Ground, the Heavenly Wing Holy Ground, and the Heavenly Frost Holy Ground to ask Bai Yuxuan, Fu Wenhao, and Long Hua about Kong Shinmu's battle prowess. In the end, someone quickly came to a conclusion. The Kong Shinmu that the three of them were talking about was extremely powerful. He had at least the power of a transcendent god stage 4, and that was not his limit. The three of them guessed that Kong Shinmu would definitely be able to enter the top 100 among the grade 6 disciples. It might even be possible for him to enter the top 10. When the people in the outside world found out about this, they were in complete disbelief. If a 5th grade disciple was able to obtain a ranking in the top 10 among all the 6th grade disciples in the sacred grounds, wouldn't that mean that this 5th grade disciple had already surpassed most of the 6th grade disciples in the sacred grounds? It could even be compared to an ordinary 7th grade disciple. In the eyes of many people, this was simply impossible. Thus this theory was formed. In order to show that they were not weak, Bai Yuxuan and the other two had raised Kong Shinmu's status infinitely high. That way they would not be too embarrassed. However, was this really the case? 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City. Gu family residence. Many people found out about the relationship between Kong Shinmu and the Gu family, and would come to visit the Gu family residence. If it was an ordinary person, the head of the Gu family would not be bothered to receive them. But what kind of people were they? Some little elder of a sacred ground at the peak of Transcendent God Stage 9. Some supreme super expert's disciple. How could a small Gu family offend such a person? Thus, he could only receive them non-stop. In the process of receiving them, many people came to matchmake for Kong Shinmu. They wanted to introduce some genius girl to Kong Shinmu or some peerless beauty from a certain sacred ground. These people could not wait to establish a relationship with Kong Shinmu. Obviously, Kong Shinmu had a bright future. He was definitely a big shot in the dragon gods, comparable to the current Emperor Xi. Although he had not completely grown up yet, his talent could already be seen. The head of the Gu family felt a headache. This was too difficult for him. Why did these people propose marriage to Kong Shinmu? He was not Kong Shinmu's father. It was just that his daughter, Gu Xinyue, had a good relationship with Kong Shinmu, and there seemed to be signs of them getting together. Facing so many big shots, the head of the Gu family did not dare to say anything. He could only say that he could not make the decision and that he had to wait for Kong Shinmu to come back. He did not want Kong Shinmu to have a relationship with other women. After all, his daughter's heart still seemed to be with Kong Shinmu. But he did not dare to say it out loud. Of course, Kong Shinmu did not know much about the situation outside. Now, he only wanted to get a better result in the competition for Class 6 disciples. The second round, the defense trial. At this time, all the people who passed the first round of the trial had come to the familiar hall in the Dragon's Soul Holy Tower. During the trial for Class 5 disciples, there were a total of 800 small worlds with 1,000 people. Finally, a total of 1,600 people could come to this hall. But now, only a little more than 1/10 of the total number of Class 6 disciples was left. So, in the end, only 180 people could come to this hall. Among the 180 people, a total of 64 people could enter the third round of the finals. The number of people was less than half of that during the trial for Class 5 disciples. But it did not affect Kong Shinmu at all. In this hall, Kong Xinmu saw several familiar figures. Gu Xinyue, Feng Ligay, Yu Tianchong, and Gu Yusheng. Recently, the three women had been inseparable. This time, during the 1,000-person small world competition, they had been divided into different small worlds. However, to everyone's surprise, all three women had appeared. The four women gathered with Kong Xinmu and asked Kong Xinmu about the next segment. Kong Xinmu told the four women everything he knew so that they would be mentally prepared. Next, the second round, the defense round. All the people in the hall rested for a while and made their preparations. A pillar of light descended from the sky and enveloped everyone. Everyone entered the small world of the pillar of light and prepared to defend against the attacks that came from around them. Kong Xinmu was very familiar with the defense round. However, he soon realized that the attacks he faced this time were stronger than before. It was reasonable to say that during the defensive round, the attacks one would encounter would be based on one's cultivation level. But now, Kong Xinmu was facing the attack of a level 3 Supreme God. In other words, he would soon face the attack of a level 6 Supreme God or even a level 7 Supreme God. This was simply asking for his life. It seemed that because he was a class 5 disciple, it had increased the difficulty for him. However, how was this just increasing the difficulty? Chapter 5403. First, it was the attack of a level 3 Transcendent God. This was not difficult for Kong Xinmu. He did not even need to use the Super Divine Dragon technique to block the attack of a level 3 Transcendent God. However, he could not block the attack of a level 4 Transcendent God. He used the Super Divine Dragon technique. Canopy of Despair. Divinity Shield. It completely surrounded Kong Xinmu's black dragon body, helping him block the countless attacks from around him. These attacks were different from normal battles. Because they came from all directions, it was much harder to block than when he faced a single opponent. Fortunately, Kong Xinmu's defense was facing all directions. Otherwise, there would be some problems. During this process, Kong Xinmu also began to rapidly devour the various elemental powers around him. Devouring power was Kong Xinmu's greatest reliance. His devouring power erupted, and as it continued to devour, his resistance to various elemental attacks became higher and higher. He finally blocked the attack of a level 5 Transcendent God. He still remembered that when Jiang Xinwu was still in the 5th class disciple's defensive rotation, he almost couldn't resist the attacks of a level 5 Transcendent God. He even had to activate the power of the Brilliant Gemstone. But now, he could block the attack of a level 5 Transcendent God with his own strength. Of course, this was also because Kong Xinmu's devouring power kept devouring the power around him, weakening the surrounding attacks and increasing his own resistance. Otherwise, Kong Xinmu would not have been able to hold on. Then, Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul. Kong Xinmu finally used this move, and it was the effect of the 33 divine feathers that gathered all his power. 33 Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Souls stood tall in the field. These Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Souls could not only be used as cannons to attack the surrounding enemies, but they could also devour and absorb the surrounding power to relieve the pressure that Kong Xinmu was under. When the 33 Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Souls appeared, the pressure on Kong Xinmu was suddenly reduced. However, the 33 Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Souls were also under great pressure. If Kong Xinmu was not careful, it was very likely that he would be destroyed by the storm of attacks around him. When Kong Xinmu persisted until here, there were already people in the hall who could not hold on any longer. They could only last until the second wave, and they could only rely on some special methods to delay the third wave. When the fourth wave arrived, there were finally only 64 people left. Gu Xinyue was still there. Yu Tianchong, Feng Ligay, and Gu Yusheng were also there. Kong Xinmu paid a little more attention and heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he started to pay attention to his fourth wave of attacks. This was an attack at the level of a level 6 Transcendent God. This was also the strongest attack that Kong Xinmu had encountered recently. Moreover, the attacks came from all directions. In almost an instant, his 33 Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Souls were shattered. Then, his canopy of despair and God's shield cracked under the power of the surroundings. At this moment, Kong Xinmu's guardian stance had been activated to its limit, and his devouring power had also devoured all the elemental powers, allowing his resistance to various elemental powers to reach its limit. However, he still could not hold on at all. The strength of a level 6 Transcendent God's attack was completely beyond his ability. He could only unleash the Brilliant Gem. However, the Brilliant Gem could not hold on for long. A moment later, he was blasted out of the light pillar. Failure. During the 5th class disciples defense round, Kong Shinmu was the last one to persevere. But now, he was ranked in the 40s. In fact, it was not because the other 6th class disciples were too strong, but Kong Shinmu's difficulty was too high. This was also intentional by the Dragon's Soul Holy Tower. After all, the reward for being the first in the defense round should not be given to Kong Shinmu a second time, right? Kong Shinmu also received accurate information about the challenge of the Dragon Soul Demon statue later. He could not challenge the Dragon Soul Demon statue. Therefore, he only needed to wait for the final 3rd round. I actually came out so quickly. However, I did not attract anyone's attention because of this. Kong Shinmu thought to himself and heaved a sigh of relief. Of course, even if he attracted attention, it would not affect him. It did not matter to him. However, he always wanted to keep a low profile. Otherwise, there would definitely be some trouble because of this. Kong Shinmu naturally would not retreat from the trouble that he had to face, but he also did not want some inexplicable trouble to find him all the time. The defense round was still going on. As for Jiang Xinwu, he had already leisurely rested by the side. As for Gu Xinyue and the other 3 girls, it was obvious that they were not particularly strong in terms of defense. Soon, Kong Shinmu was defeated. They were all ranked in the middle range. However, they were all disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land. This meant that they were quite strong. Among the 6th class disciples, the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land had already occupied 4 seats. Even if they could not reach the top, they could still maintain their current total points. Not bad. As for the competition between the 7th class disciples, there was nothing that Kong Shinmu could do. He did not know any 7th class disciples. Right now, Kong Shinmu was still able to affect the competition between the 6th class disciples a little. At least for Gu Xinyue, if she had not obtained the power of the psychedelic astral crystal, she would not have been able to reach this level. The power of the psychedelic astral crystal allowed her nightmare illusory dragon innate talent to be displayed to the extreme. In the small world of 1,000 people, she had already displayed the terrifying dominance of the nightmare illusory dragon. Although Kong Shinmu was still the #1 killer among the 6th class disciples, Gu Xinyue was not weak. She was the same as Kong Shinmu, only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm. This was the first layer of confusion, and the second layer was the power of her nightmare illusory dragon. With these 2 layers of confusion, most 6th class disciples would basically fall into her illusion trap and be defeated by her in the end. Thus, she had defeated nearly 100 people in the end. Excluding Kong Shinmu, she could be considered in the top 5 in terms of number of kills. Right now, this round of defense was really not her strong point. She first blocked the attack of the 1st level of the Transcendent God, then the 2nd level, and finally, under the attack of the 3rd level of the Transcendent God, she was defeated. She did not last much longer than Kong Shinmu. From this, it could be seen that Kong Shinmu's defense had already surpassed her by a large margin. Of course, the final ranking did not matter how good one's defense was, but one's defense was still a factor of reference. None of us can enter the top 30? Gu Xinyue, Yu Tianchong, and the other girls gathered around Kong Shinmu. They did not know whether to laugh or cry. The defense of the other 6th class disciples was really strong. Kong Shinmu, why did you come out so quickly? Chapter 5404. Kong Shinmu didn't know what to say, so he could only smile and shake his head. There was really nothing to say about it. If he had come here to participate in the trial as a Class 6 disciple, he would definitely rank at the top of the defense round, and even win first place. Unfortunately, he was now a Class 5 disciple. The defense round was much more difficult for him. Therefore, it was almost impossible for him to rank at the top. At this moment, as all the people that Kong Shinmu knew were defeated, the other Class 6 disciples were also defeated in the defense round one by one. In the end, there were still people who could reach the level of Kong Shinmu when he was a Class 5 disciple. They had resisted a fairly strong attack. Of course, they had also used the power of the brilliant gemstone. Otherwise, No one would be able to withstand such a powerful attack from all directions. After the defense round, it's time to challenge the Dragon Soul Golem. After thinking for a while, Kong Xinmu explained some details to the girls next to him. The four girls, Gu Xinyue, Yu Tianchong, Gu Yuxing, and Feng Ligay, were now faced with a difficult problem, and that was to form a team. Gu Xinyue's cultivation was at the peak of the Dragon Emperor, and she was not suitable to form a team with the other three girls. Moreover, the Nightmare Dragon's ability was basically useless against the Dragon Soul Golem, and its talent could be given up. Therefore, Gu Xinyue basically gave up on the Dragon Soul Golem challenge. As for the other three girls, they could only form a team of two at most, since they couldn't enter together. The last one could either give up like Gu Xinyue, or form a team with someone else. How about this? Xinyue will form a team with me, and Yuxing, Yu and Ligay will form a team. Yu Tianchong thought for a while and made a decision. My ability is not suitable for challenging the Dragon Soul Golem. So, I'll go in with Gu Xinyue and just go through the motions. You two have to work hard. In fact, Yu Tianchong's ability was not bad, and she was not completely unsuitable for challenging the Dragon Soul Golem. But she didn't want to put her friends in a difficult position, nor did she want to form a team with others. Since that was the case, this decision wasn't too bad. Since Yu Tianchong had said so, the women were not pretentious people, so they all nodded. I probably won't be able to participate. You guys can do it. Kong Xinmu didn't find it unfair. After all, he had already challenged the Dragon Soul Demon once. He couldn't possibly give him another reward now, right? Even he himself felt that he was too heaven-defying. In any case, Jiang Shenwu had gained a lot from this trip to the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. It almost doubled his combat power. In the future, when he stepped into the Transcendent stage, he would become even stronger and have an extremely far-reaching influence. Very soon. All the golden light pillars and small worlds in the hall dissipated. In the end, the ranking of the defensive round came out. In the end, Kong Xinmu still carefully observed every small world within the Golden Pillar of Light. He had a deeper understanding of the 6th grade disciples and dragon martial artists within each small world. At the very least, he had a good understanding of their defensive abilities. The results of the defensive round would be included in the total points, so no one would hide too much of their strength here. At most, they would hide some trump cards. The combat power that they had displayed now was basically their ultimate combat power. It would be enough to consider more trump cards. Kong Xinmu was still rather solemn. From this defensive round, he could tell that there were many strong opponents. It wouldn't be easy for him to get first place among the 6th grade disciples this time. Generally speaking, the 6th grade disciples of each sanctum were between the 1st and 3rd level of the Super Shenron. And now, the combat power displayed by the top few in the defensive round had reached the 5th level of the Transcendent stage. They were at the 4th level of the Transcendent stage. Logically speaking, such dragon martial artists should have become 7th grade disciples long ago. However, it was unknown why they hadn't advanced. In short, Kong Xinmu was already facing such opponents. For him, this kind of opponent was very strong, and was a great challenge for him. Next, it was time to challenge the Dragon Soul Golems. With the details provided by Kong Xinmu, the results of Gu Yuxing and Feng Ligay shouldn't be too bad. At the very least, they should be able to defeat the 3 Dragon Soul Golems. As for Gu Xinyue and Yu Tianchong, their strength wasn't equal. If they teamed up to challenge the Dragon Soul Golems, they would basically encounter opponents that Gu Xinyue couldn't match up to. Therefore, they would basically be relying on Yu Tianchong's combat power. 2 Dragon Soul Golems shouldn't be a problem. If 3 Dragon Soul Golems went up together, there might be some pressure. Of course, it couldn't be 100% confirmed that Gu Xinyue's Nightmare Dragon power was ineffective against the Dragon Soul Golems. If it was effective, then Gu Xinyue would obviously be of great help. After everyone was teleported away, only Kong Xinmu was left in the hall. He was bored to death as he waited. Soon, some groups of people who had failed the challenge appeared in the hall. These groups were basically 6th-class dragon warriors from different holy lands. They weren't familiar with their teammates, and they were more cautious when challenging the Dragon Soul Golems. As a result, they couldn't exert their full combat power to deal with the Dragon Soul Golems. As a result, they were teleported out in advance. They were defeated at the checkpoint of the 3 Dragon Soul Golems. It seems that Gu Xinyue and the others are doing well. Kong Xinmu was relieved that he didn't see Gu Xinyue and the other 3 girls. If they could defeat 3 Dragon Soul Golems, they would be able to see 4 Dragon Soul Golems fight at the same time. In Kong Xinmu's view, few people could defeat the 4 Dragon Soul Golems. Yu Tianchong and the others probably couldn't do it. Of course, it wasn't certain. Eventually, more and more people came out. Kong Xinmu kept observing, but he didn't see the 4 girls. Finally, when the number of 6th class disciples in the hall was almost enough, and most of the dragon warriors had come out, Gu Yuxing and Feng Ligay were teleported out. The 2 girls had obviously gained a lot. Transcendent dragon weapons, dragon martial techniques, and so on would greatly increase their battle power. But now was not the time. Their improvement could only come after they left this place. But Gu Xinyue and Yu Tianchong still didn't come out. Could it be that Gu Xinyue's nightmare dragon power is also effective against the Dragon Soul Golems? If so, they may be able to challenge quite a high level. Kong Xinmu thought to himself. He didn't expect that Yu Tianchong would choose Gu Xinyue to challenge the Dragon Soul Golems together. He thought it was just a formality, but it turned out that they had gone so far. Since they hadn't come out yet, it was very likely that they were challenging the 4 Dragon Soul Golems. Chapter 5405. Kong Xinmu observed the 4 strongest disciples carefully. It was obvious that these 4 powerhouses had many defensive methods, and each of them had even cultivated several defensive dragon martial skills. Some even cultivated body-refining dragon techniques. Those who could reach this stage were obviously the best among the grade 6 disciples. Although it was difficult to cultivate the super divine dragon technique to the ultimate sage realm, their defensive dragon techniques were all at the ultimate sage realm. Moreover, they were all at the Supreme God Stage 3. There was even one at the Supreme God Stage 4. It's too difficult to defeat such an opponent. Kong Xinmu was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor level. His opponents were 3 to 4 levels stronger than him. The attacks of such an opponent were extremely fierce and had even reached the level of being able to shake the brilliant gemstone. The brilliant ornate stone could also unleash a stronger defensive ability in their hands. Even if I rely on the extreme destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul, I won't be able to threaten them. At the last moment of the defensive round, these 4 experts were all resisting the powerful attacks of the Supreme God Stage 6. Each of them had resisted for a long time. It was unknown if they had used their full strength. Each of them should have some hidden strength. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible for Kong Xinmu to defeat them. Because the opponent could defeat Kong Xinmu with one move. And Kong Xinmu's strongest attack could not break through the opponent's defense. Unless it's still the devouring power. As long as the devouring power can cut into the opponent and corrode the opponent's divine dragon body, I can drag the opponent to death. There was no doubt about that. However, the key was to injure the opponent. This was far too difficult to accomplish. There's another possibility. I can use the opponent's attack to counterattack. This is also very difficult, but I can use this method to open a hole in the opponent's divine dragon body. No matter how Kong Xinmu thought about it, he could only use this method to defeat such an existence. The only way. First, he would use the opponent's attack to accumulate enough strength before counterattacking. Then, he would use the devouring power to wear the opponent down. This method must not be leaked. Otherwise, I will only fail. This method was not very feasible in the first place. Not to mention, if others found out about it, he would have no chance at all. The other party would definitely not give him the slightest chance. Therefore, he had to hide this series of methods. Fortunately, in the 3rd round, his opponent would not have the opportunity to learn his fighting style. Moreover, Kong Xinmu had never displayed such a fighting style before. However, there was one person that Kong Xinmu was concerned about. That person was from the Hidden Death Sacred Land. In other words, she was Yi Yin's senior sister. It was a young girl who looked to be in her 20s. She had shoulder-length blonde hair, and her face was as beautiful as an angel's. No one would have thought that such a young lady was from the Hidden Death Sacred Land. However, her divine dragon bloodline was the same as Invakil, a lone Invakil dragon. This girl might even know Yi Yin, as they were the strongest among the 5th tier and 6th tier disciples of the Hidden Death Holy Land. Could Yi Yin have told her about my fighting style? I still have to pay attention to this. At this time, everyone had completed the second round of defense. They were all observing the others in the hall, preparing for the upcoming third round. Obviously, Kong Xinmu and Gu Xinyue, who were at the peak of the Dragon Emperor, were not taken seriously by these people. Although they were considered geniuses to be able to enter the current stage at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. However, no matter how talented they were only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor level. It was not easy to become a 6th-tier disciple and make it this far. It was almost impossible to obtain a good result in the final battle sequence. Therefore, Kong Xinmu and the others were basically ignored by most people. However, there was still one person who paid attention to Kong Xinmu. It was the golden-haired girl from the Hidden Death Sacred Land. The girl's eyes were wide open as she looked at Kong Xinmu from head to toe. Because Kong Xinmu came out too early, she had not been able to observe Kong Xinmu's performance in the defense round. However, from the looks of it, she obviously knew of Kong Xinmu's existence and was quite interested in Kong Xinmu. Kong Xinmu was keenly aware of this, including the girls around him. Shenwu, look at that girl looking at you. Do you know her? Gu Xinyue pulled Kong Xinmu's arm and asked curiously. Kong Xinmu shook his head. I don't know her. He really did not know her, but it seemed that she knew him a little. Her name is Haquin, a genius of the Hidden Death Holy Land. She's the number 1 among the grade 6 disciples. Gu Yuxing covered her mouth and chuckled. When I went on a training trip, I went near the Hidden Death Holy Land and heard rumors about her. It said that she's a very strong woman. Strong? Kong Xinmu could not tell how strong this girl was, but he was sure that her combat strength was very strong. Haquin, Yi-in. Was there any connection between the two of them? It was already very strange that they were called Haquin and Yi-in. This surname was very rare, so it was very possible that they came from the same sect. In this case, it was normal that Yi-in told Haquin about Kong Xinmu. If she knows some of my combat methods, she might be on guard against me. In this case, this Haquin is very likely to be my biggest opponent in the third round. Kong Xinmu thought to himself. The girl Haquin's blonde hair was very dazzling, attracting the attention of many young experts around her. There were even some middle-aged experts among the 6th-class disciples. Their strength had stagnated, but they still belonged to the category of the 6th-class disciples. Even they were very curious about Haquin. Obviously, Haquin was very charming, and she was very attractive to men. Kong Xinmu did not think too much about it. He just wanted to give his best performance in the next round. The third round is about to begin. I wonder who my first opponent will be. Kong Xinmu thought to himself. Soon, the white light enveloped everyone in the hall. Jiang Shenwu's vision blurred, and he discovered that he had arrived in the sky above a desert. This desert appeared to be incomparably dry, and it was an extremely hot terrain. And the opponent in front of him turned out to be Yu Tianchong. Yu Tianchong's expression changed slightly when she saw Kong Xinmu. Obviously, she did not expect that she would meet Kong Xinmu in the third round. She could not help but smile bitterly, and her beautiful face was a little helpless. Kong Xinmu, it's you. I'm so unlucky. Obviously, Yu Tianchong knew that she was not Kong Xinmu's opponent. Chapter 5406. However, it was not Yu Tianchong's style to retreat without a fight. Finally, we can have a decisive battle. Yu Tianchong pursed her lips and smiled. She recalled the first time she met Kong Xinmu. At that time, Kong Xinmu was too weak compared to Yu Tianchong. However, Yu Tianchong had already seen his potential. Then, Kong Xinmu left Donghuang Yonggu College and went to Emperor Shi's Dragon Martial Arts Academy. At this moment, Yu Yaji was the dean of Emperor Shi's Dragon Martial Arts Academy in the Dragon Martial Arts continent, and Yu Tianchong was her relative. Anyway, the relationship between Kong Xinmu and Yu Tianchong was quite close, and they were almost inseparable. Without Yu Tianchong, there would be no Kong Xinmu. Kong Xinmu knew this very well. Although he had become stronger and had even gained a foothold in the Dragon God's macro world, he was still grateful to Yu Tianchong. Of course, being grateful didn't mean that he would go easy on her and lose the battle on purpose. This was a fair competition. Yu Tianchong's divine dragon bloodline was the heavenly phoenix feather dragon, and her strength was beyond doubt. But now, Kong Xinmu was even stronger. In the desert the two sides fought. Yu Tianchong didn't hesitate at all. She burst out a terrible power and swept it toward Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu was still very cautious. He took the opportunity to use the desperate sky screen. The pitch-black devouring power condensed into a desperate sky screen and blocked Yu Tianchong's attack. At the same time, the God Shield condensed by Kong Shinmu's power surrounded his body and protected his Divine Dragon body. Divine Dragon Tyrant Body Technique. Kong Shinmu switched the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body Technique to the Guardian mode. At this moment, although his defense had not reached its limit, it was not something that could be broken by an ordinary opponent at the same level. The other Dragon Emperor pinnacle powerhouses were no match for him. Even though Yu Tianchong was already at Transcendent God Stage 2, it was still difficult for her to break through Kong Shinmu's defense. But Yu Tianchong's tyrannical attack transformed into countless heavenly clothes and phoenix feathers that glowed with a golden light. With a loud rumble, they swept toward Kong Shinmu's God Wind. The terrifying attack actually shook Kong Shinmu's God Shield. This was something that Kong Shinmu had not expected. Although he hadn't switched the formless weapon Chen Xing's battle runes to defensive battle runes, his current defense was second only to his own at his limit. The fact that Yu Tianchong's attack could shake his defense was no easy feat. So powerful. Little did he know that at this moment, Yu Tianchong was even more surprised than Kong Shinmu. After all, she was at Transcendent God Stage 2. The Super Divine Dragon bloodline was already much stronger than Kong Shinmu's Dragon Emperor. Moreover, she had already cultivated the Super Divine Dragon technique to the Sacred Tier. Although it had not reached the Sacred Tier, it was still the highest level of the Super Divine Dragon technique. In addition, Yu Tianchong's killer move. As a heavenly clothes phoenix feather dragon, the Divine Dragon bloodline inheritance had extremely strong explosive power. Coupled with Yu Tianchong's own explosive dragon technique, it was a double explosive power. In other words, the attack of Yu Tianchong's heavenly clothes phoenix feather dragon was something that even an ordinary Transcendent God Stage 4 dragon martial artist could not withstand. If she did not have such a powerful attack, she would not have been able to come all the way here. However, after encountering Kong Shinmu, powerless. This was how Yu Tianchong felt now. Too powerless. Although her attack strength was considered to be at the peak of Transcendent God Stage 2, she still felt powerless when facing Kong Shinmu. It was no wonder that Kong Shinmu could become number 1 among the Grade 5 disciples. His strength was simply too terrifying. Of course, Yu Tianchong also knew that Kong Shinmu was the best at defense. Therefore, she was not too surprised. Instead, she immediately unleashed an even stronger attack, wave after wave, again and again. Yu Tianchong did not give Kong Shinmu any chance to catch his breath. Endless power poured down on Kong Shinmu's pitch-black divine dragon body. As for Kong Shinmu, he was still in a state of defense. He did not counterattack, nor did he use the extreme destructive Heaven's Might Dragon Soul. After all, the power of the Super Divine Dragon technique needed some time to be unleashed. He was now familiarizing himself with a method he was about to use. Devouring the opponent's attack strength and counterattacking. After Yu Tianchong attacked Kong Shinmu 5 times in a row, Kong Shinmu's devouring power had devoured at least 2 of her complete attack strength. This strength was completely transformed into the devouring power in his body. Then, it merged with a violent momentum and burst out. Yu Tianchong could barely react. Kong Shinmu's attack was too fast. Moreover, it was just as she was about to launch her next attack. She could not move. The super strong power collided with the power of her dragon technique in midair. In the end, Kong Shinmu's devouring power turned into a pitch-black power and completely defeated Yu Tianchong's attack. Then, the power roared out violently and engulfed Yu Tianchong's heavenly phoenix feather dragon body. The winner had been decided. At the last moment, Yu Tianchong tried to use her dragon-like body technique to travel through space. Unfortunately, Kong Shinmu's attack was too fast. Before she could travel through space, she was already enveloped by Kong Shinmu's power. Fortunately, they were in the simulated space of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Otherwise, Yu Tianchong would have completely lost her breath. Kong Shinmu won. Then, Yu Tianchong appeared outside the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Her journey was over. She looked at the magnificent Dragon Soul Holy Tower in front of her, as well as some dragon warriors who appeared outside the tower, and smiled bitterly. She could not compare with Kong Shinmu's current level. That boy was growing too fast, wasn't he? In the assembly hall of the Dragon's Soul Holy Tower, Jiang Shenwu appeared here, and at the same time, he saw a few familiar figures. The one he paid more attention to was Hakwin from the secret Death Holy Land. This blonde girl seemed to have returned to the outside a long time ago. Kong Shinmu defeated Yu Tianchong after receiving 5 attacks from her. But this blonde girl, Hakwin, probably defeated her opponent in one move as soon as she entered the tower. She was even more straightforward than Yi Yin. If there was any relationship between them, Kong Shinmu felt that Hakwin was probably Yi Yin's elder sister. Judging from Hakwin's appearance, she had a strong personality. It should not be wrong to say that she was his elder sister. Of course, Kong Shinmu would not go up to talk to Hakwin. After all, they did not know each other yet. But Hakwin was still squinting and paying attention to Kong Shinmu from time to time. She seemed to be very interested in Kong Shinmu. Then, Kong Shinmu began to observe the others around him. Kong Shinmu did not see Gu Yuxing and Feng Ligay again. They were probably defeated in the first round. There were so many powerful dragon warriors present, and they were basically at the 3rd level of Supreme God. It was already not easy for them to stay until now. It was not an easy task to move forward. Chapter 5407. Gu Xinyue was able to win a match. This surprised Kong Shinmu. After all, Gu Xinyue was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm. According to the battle order of the Dragon's Soul Holy Tower, she, who was at the lowest realm, would basically be matched against someone with a higher realm. It was highly likely that she would be matched against someone at the 3rd stage of the Transcendent God realm. However, such an opponent had actually been defeated by her hands. This was something Kong Shinmu did not expect. He and Gu Xinyue looked at each other and smiled. It seems like the Nightmare Illusory Dragon is indeed very powerful, especially when dealing with opponents with complicated thoughts. Kong Shinmu thought to himself. Gu Xinyue's Nightmare Illusory Dragon bloodline had almost completely erupted after obtaining the psychedelic star crystal. It might not have been obvious under normal circumstances. Under normal circumstances, it could not be seen, but at certain times, it could bring about quite a good effect. She had even defeated a Transcendent God Stage 3 opponent. This undoubtedly shocked everyone present. The peak of the Dragon Emperor realm? She could actually defeat her opponent and enter the next round. In other words, a girl at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm actually became the top 32 of the Class 6 disciples. It was too shocking. It should be known that those who were able to enter the top 100 of the 6th class disciples were already the best among the 6th class disciples. On average, almost every one of them could become one of the best among the 6th class disciples in their respective holy lands. However, she was actually defeated by a girl at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm? Something unexpected finally happened. Everyone was sizing up Gu Xinyue, wanting to know what was so special about her. Meanwhile, Gu Xinyue was feeling nervous because she was able to defeat her opponent completely because of the power of the Nightmare Illusory Dragon. This kind of power was more effective against men. If she were to face a woman next, she might not be able to continue. On the other hand, Kong Shinmu, Gu Xinyue had high hopes for Kong Shinmu. Although Kong Shinmu was also at the peak of the Dragon Emperor, his ability to fight head-on was still much stronger than hers. He might be able to fight against the strongest guys among the 6th class disciples present. No matter what, the competition continued. In the 3rd round, the top 32 would continue to battle. As everyone was enveloped by the white pillar of light, they arrived at their respective battlegrounds. It was an independent small world, and it was impossible for anyone else to interfere with the battle between the two of them. Kong Shinmu's opponent was a middle-aged woman at Transcendent God Stage 3. She had a fire element innate power. Seeing this opponent, Kong Shinmu heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the strongest existence hadn't been arranged for him. The middle-aged woman in front of him wasn't too strong for Kong Shinmu, but she wasn't too weak either. At the very least, she was a bit stronger than Yu Tianchong. As for how much stronger they were, they could only find out after fighting. On the other side, Gu Xinyue opened her eyes and saw that her opponent was one of the strongest among the remaining 32. The golden-haired girl, Hakwin. When Hakwin saw that Gu Xinyue was her opponent, she didn't look down on her. Instead, she was a little surprised. Moreover, she seemed to be very curious. She even asked, "You're from the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land, right? You know Kong Shinmu, right?" "Yes," Gu Xinyue answered without hesitation. At the same time, she became a little wary. This golden-haired girl, Hakwin, seemed to be quite interested in Kong Shinmu. She had to pay attention to this. Putting her power aside for now, the most important thing was that Bai Yin was simply too beautiful. Although she wasn't much better than Gu Xinyue in terms of style, Gu Xinyue would still be careful even if they were at the same level of beauty. She really liked Kong Shinmu. If this Hakwin was interested in Kong Shinmu, she might even try to seduce Kong Shinmu. Gu Xinyue was always very careful and guarded against the women who appeared around Kong Shinmu. Yu Tianchong and the other two were like that. However, Gu Xinyue realized that Kong Shinmu didn't have any ambiguous relationship with them. They were just ordinary friends. But this Hakwin was different. Most importantly, this Hakwin seemed to be very interested in Kong Shinmu. Therefore, Gu Xinyue directly said that she knew Kong Shinmu. In this way, it was equivalent to declaring her sovereignty in front of Hakwin. "It seems that Kong Shinmu is indeed famous in your holy land of 5 extremes dark ice." Hakwin pursed her lips and smiled. With her golden hair, she looked extremely beautiful when she smiled. With her sharp senses, she even sensed that there seemed to be a rather special relationship between Gu Xinyue and Kong Shinmu. Hakwin didn't care about this. She only wanted to see how powerful Kong Shinmu was. Since that was the case, she would first beat Gu Xinyue out. The battle began. Against the golden-haired girl, Gu Xinyue's nightmare dragon was still useful, but it wasn't very useful. Therefore, Gu Xinyue, whose true strength was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor, wasn't a match for Hakwin at all in a head-on battle. After all, Hakwin was in existence at the 3rd stage of the Transcendent God stage. Moreover, her combat strength was simply too strong. At the start, Gu Xinyue still used the innate ability of the Nightmare Dragon to restrict Hakwin's performance. But very quickly, Hakwin broke through the restriction of the Nightmare Dragon's innate ability and exploded. Gu Xinyue was defeated. Hakwin was one of the fastest to defeat her opponent. When she returned to the hall, she found that Kong Shinmu hadn't come out yet. In fact, there was no one else in the hall. After a while, someone else appeared in the hall and ended the battle. Hakwin had been waiting all this time. There were already 11 people in the hall when Kong Shinmu finally appeared in front of Hakwin. The speed at which he defeated his opponent was obviously not much. In fact, it was slightly slow. This made Hakwin a little confused about Kong Shinmu's combat strength. However, she had obviously heard about some of Kong Shinmu's combat strength from Yi Yin. Combined with the fact that Kong Shinmu's speed at defeating his opponent seemed to be relatively slow, then she had a better understanding of the combat style of Kong Shinmu led by Hakwin. In fact, Yi Yin didn't tell Hakwin too much about Kong Shinmu. After all, although Yi Yin and Hakwin had a good relationship, in fact, there was definitely a competitive relationship between them. Yi Yin also wanted to see what kind of expression Hakwin would have if she lost to a Dragon Emperor at his peak, which was Kong Shinmu. At first, when Yi Yin told Hakwin that Kong Shinmu was very strong, Hakwin didn't pay much attention to it. And until now, Hakwin didn't particularly care about Kong Shinmu. It was just because of Yi Yin that she paid more attention to Kong Shinmu. As for Kong Shinmu's strength, she didn't think it would be too strong. A defensive type of combat style? Unfortunately, he met me. A mere Dragon Emperor at his peak will never have a chance to defend. Chapter 5408. Kong Shinmu didn't know that Gu Xinyue would encounter Hakwin. If they met, he would definitely be no match for her. On the other hand, Kong Shinmu defeated his opponent very smoothly. Although it wasn't particularly fast, it was still very stable. Kong Shinmu's current combat power wasn't overwhelming. Among the dragon martial artists of this realm, his combat power wasn't considered high. If he wanted to defeat his opponent, he could only rely on the devouring power. And there was only one way to win. When Kong Shinmu returned to the hall, he found that the others were already there. There were only 16 people left in the hall. And Kong Shinmu was the last one to appear in the hall. After all, Kong Shinmu had devoured a lot of his opponent's power to finally defeat his opponent. Therefore, it was completely normal for him to spend more time. When Kong Shinmu appeared, everyone looked at him. Then, The eyes of most of the dragon warriors were filled with shock. This guy was at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm. He actually made it this far? In the third round, he actually defeated 2 opponents in a row and became one of the top 16? This was too shocking. Was this brat stronger than expected, or were the opponents this brat was assigned to be too weak? According to the situation in the Dragon's Soul Holy Tower, it was usually the weak against the strong. There wouldn't be a situation where the weak would be grouped together and the strong eliminated each other. They didn't understand. However, Hakwin found it even more interesting. The more outstanding Kong Shinmu's performance was, the funnier it was to her. After all, Yi Yin admired Kong Shinmu very much. And Hakwin's favorite hobby was to defeat Yi Yin. If she could defeat Kong Shinmu, whom Yi Yin admired, easily, wouldn't it be great? Then the next battle began. A white light flashed before Kong Shinmu's eyes. Then, he came to the sky above a dense forest. A brand new world, a brand new opponent. It was an old man. Unlike the previous battles between the several ranks of disciples, there were already many older dragon martial artists in the battle of the 6th-ranked disciples. After all, the 6th-ranked disciple stage was already the limit of many dragon martial artists' cultivation in this lifetime. Although 5th grade and 4th grade disciples were the limits of some dragon warriors. Generally speaking, 4th grade and 5th grade disciples were the limits of dragon warriors. Their cultivation talent was not very good. Therefore, it was very difficult for the older 4th and 5th class disciples to reach the end. But 6th grade disciples were different. At least half of the top 16 that Kong Shinmu saw were youngsters. Of course, even if one looked young on the surface, there was no telling how old they were. As long as they broke through at a relatively young age, it would be easy for them to maintain their youthful appearance. Moreover, the later the competition between the 7th and 8th class disciples, the older dragon martial artists would definitely make up a larger portion of the competition. This was without a doubt. Kong Shinmu's opponent in the top 16 battle was an old man. This old man was wearing a gray robe. It was not clear which holy land he came from, but Kong Shinmu could feel that he was very strong. He was at least equivalent to a 5th stage transcendent god. This old man was one of the 6th class disciples who had effortlessly blocked the attack of a 5th stage transcendent god. This person appeared in the small world and only glanced at Kong Shinmu. His deep eyes were as calm as an ancient well. Obviously, this old man did not feel the slightest bit of emotion that his opponent was Kong Shinmu. He was not surprised, nor did he underestimate. He just treated Kong Shinmu as a normal opponent. Obviously, this kind of older opponent was very difficult to deal with. Generally speaking, they were very knowledgeable and had a very calm mentality. When faced with any situation, they could analyze it to their best advantage. A 3rd stage transcendent god elder. This old man had obviously stayed at the 3rd stage transcendent god for a long time. His combat power had completely surpassed that of an ordinary 3rd stage transcendent god. Immediately after, this old man transformed into an earth element divine dragon. Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Dragon. He did not expect this old man to be a 6th class disciple of the Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Holy Land. Kong Shinmu was not too surprised. No matter who his opponent was, he had to deal with it in his best condition and defeat his opponent. Dragon Transformation. The body of the Black Divine Dragon followed closely behind and appeared in mid-air. Immediately after, both sides actually displayed their defensive dragon martial skills, and then collided in mid-air. Terrifying power burst forth with waves of energy vortexes. The Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Dragon's defense was indeed very strong, but its attack could not be ignored. While defending, there were many earth element sword lights sweeping towards Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu did not care. His devouring power erupted and directly swallowed the earth element sword lights. Very quickly. The strength of both sides was about the same. Although Kong Shinmu was only at the pinnacle of the Dragon Emperor, he was much stronger in other aspects. After all, Kong Shinmu could be said to have specialized in defense and body-refining dragon skills. Therefore, in terms of defense, he was not inferior to the old man. However, in terms of attack, he was clearly much weaker. Although Kong Shinmu's attack was very weak, to the point that the old man did not even feel the slightest bit of pressure, the old man did not relax his defense. However, the old man, who was originally focused on defense, began to erupt with a portion of his attack to try to attack Kong Shinmu. As expected of an older dragon martial artist, His combat experience was extremely rich. Even in this kind of crushing battle between a third-stage transcendent god and a pinnacle dragon emperor, he did not underestimate his opponent at all. If this old man wasn't overly cautious, then he must have encountered something in the past that made him so cautious. Of course, being cautious was not a bad thing. However, it was too much to be cautious in front of Kong Shin-mu. This was because the more time dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for Kong Shin-mu. Now, Kong Shin-mu had completely devoured his opponent's earth element power, allowing his own resistance to earth element power to reach its strongest state. Under such circumstances, as long as Kong Shin-mu entered a state of complete defense, it would be impossible for him to be defeated by his opponent. This old man's defense was very strong, and his attack was also very strong. However, they were both around the standard of a fifth-stage transcendent god. Even if he used the Transcendent God Dragon weapon and activated the Transcendent God Dragon skill, it was still the same. To be able to fight someone 2 levels above him, this old man was considered one of the best among the third-stage Transcendent God Dragon martial artists. He was indeed one of the 16 strongest among the 6th-stage disciples of the more than 100 holy lands of the dragon gods. However, Kong Shin-mu was even more terrifying than him. At the pinnacle of the Dragon Emperor, Kong Shin-mu's defense had already reached the level of a 5th-stage transcendent god. In fact, it could even be stronger than this. Under a state of complete defense, unless it was a true 5th-stage transcendent god, it would not be that difficult to break through Kong Shin-mu's defense. Chapter 5409. Kong Shin-mu had already devoured enough power in the midst of his constant defense. These powers were all transformed into a devouring power, but it was several times the power of that old man's attack. Kong Shin-mu was looking for an opportunity. Not long after. That old man's state of mind was still calm, but seeing that his attack on Kong Shin-mu was completely ineffective, he also became a little anxious. He wanted to defeat Kong Shin-mu as soon as possible. After all, Kong Shin-mu was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. Even if he was competing with Kong Shin-mu in terms of energy consumption, he also guessed that Kong Shin-mu should be almost exhausted. Hence, just as this old man's state of mind was a little anxious, Kong Shin-mu suddenly made a move. An incomparably tyrannical power erupted at this time. This power was all condensed by Kong Shin-mu when he devoured all of that old man's attack previously. Devour, counterattack. That old man completely did not expect that Kong Shin-mu still had such a horrifying attack method, and could not react for a moment. However, his movements were still extremely fast. At the same time that Jiang Shenwu erupted with power, he had already displayed his most powerful defensive dragon martial skill. Waves of yellow sand sword light erupted at this moment, surrounding the body of the wild sand brilliant sword dragon that the old man transformed into, protecting him. However, the power that Kong Shin-mu erupted this time exceeded his expectations. His yellow sand sword light defense actually had no way of resisting under Kong Shin-mu's devouring power. In the next instant, these powers landed with a loud rumble, drowning the entire body of the wild sand brilliant sword dragon. Kong Shin-mu's attack was decisive and swift, not giving that old man the slightest chance to resist. But the power of Kong Shin-mu's attack this time was also greatly offset by the waves of yellow sand sword light. Even when it landed on the body of the wild sand brilliant sword dragon, there was already not much left. Fortunately, the wild sand brilliant sword dragon did not cultivate any body-tempering dragon martial technique. Therefore, when Kong Shin-mu's power took form and crashed down, it still blasted many wounds on his opponent's divine dragon body. Then, Kong Shin-mu's devouring power surged in and corroded it. It was time to devour the essence of flesh and blood. At this moment, it was time for Kong Shin-mu to gain victory. However, at this moment, he still had to guard against his opponent's counterattack. After all, he had just started devouring, so he couldn't restrict his opponent's strength too much. Once his opponent erupted with a trump card attack, there was still a possibility that he could defeat Kong Shin-mu. However, the old man in front of him clearly did not have any tricks up his sleeves. Of course, he still had his trump cards, but even if he used them, he still couldn't break through Kong Shin-mu's strongest defense. At this moment, Kong Shin-mu had activated his strongest defense. Not only did the Divine Dragon Tyrant body art display a defensive stance, but his Divine Dragon body was also surrounded by the Divine Shield. The Despair Canopy was also constantly being used, And even the dragon soldier Chen was completely transformed into a defensive battle pattern. Therefore, now that Kong Shinmu was fully armed, the old man in front of him really couldn't break through Kong Shinmu's defense. Next, it was time for the old man to despair. This old man, a 6th grade disciple of the Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Holy Land, had never seen Kong Shinmu's fighting style. Although he had only suffered a minor injury, but that power just now seemed to be related to him? Did this kid absorb his power? Also, he had only suffered a minor injury, but he felt a strange power corroding his body, causing his life force to continuously flow away. This was the most terrifying thing. Moreover, he found that he couldn't get rid of the strange power that was corroding his body at all. It was too terrifying. This kid's fighting style is interconnected. If it weren't for his minor injury, this kid wouldn't have a way to defeat me. But the attack that he condensed just now broke through my defense. The old man realized that Kong Shinmu was difficult to deal with and powerful. This was the first time he had seen such a terrifying dragon emperor at his peak. If he was in those middle-grade relics, this kid would definitely be invincible. The old man shook his head. In the end, when he felt that his divine dragon body was getting weaker and weaker, and it was even more impossible for him to defeat Kong Shinmu, he chose to recognize him. Although he came from the Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Holy Land, this old man really hadn't participated in the siege of the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land. This old man in the Wild Sand Brilliant Sword Holy Land could be considered to have been cultivating in seclusion. Moreover, because he was older, he rarely went out to train. He really didn't know much about the outside world. The new generation surpasses the old. The old man sighed and then admitted defeat. As Kong Shinmu returned to the hall, there were only 8 people left in the entire hall. These were the top 8 6th grade disciples in the entire Dragon God's great world, among more than 100 holy lands. As expected, Gu Xinyue wasn't here. Kong Shinmu didn't think too much about it. Although she didn't make it to the end, Gu Xinyue's cultivation was, after all, only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. It was already quite difficult for her to make it to the top 16, let alone have a chance to compete for the top 10. In any case, Kong Shinmu had to focus on the next battle. There were still 8 people left. One was Kong Shinmu, one was Hakuin, and among the other 6, there were 2 young people, a man and a woman, 2 old men, and 2 middle-aged men. This age distribution was quite even. Among these people, Kong Shinmu and Hakuin were undoubtedly the most eye-catching. That was because they were the youngest and the strongest of them all. Of course, for the others, Hakuin was their final opponent. As for Kong Shinmu, they were slightly surprised that Kong Shinmu could make it to this stage. Obviously, not everyone had a certain understanding of Kong Shinmu. Among the remaining 8 people, apart from Kong Shinmu himself, only Hakuin cared a little about him. Of course, it didn't mean that Hakuin was very cautious. She only knew a little about Kong Shinmu's strength and that Kong Shinmu was the first among the 5th grade disciples. But now, it was the competition of the 6th grade disciples. Hakuin thought, I can't let Kong Shinmu get the first place in the competition of the 6th grade disciples, can I? It would be best if I meet this Kong Shinmu in the next battle. Hakuin thought. Anyway, there were only 8 people left in the hall. Everyone wanted to be the strongest one. Even among the 8 people, their combat strength was almost the same. No one could say that they would win for sure because they were all at the peak of the 6th grade disciples. It was very difficult to crush the others, unless they had the same opportunity as Kong Shinmu. Only then could they crush the other 5th grade disciples. But among the 6th grade disciples, there was obviously no one who had the same opportunity as Kong Shinmu. The next round begins. My opponent is... Chapter 54:10. His opponent this time was a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man's combat power was very stable. He was a Transcendent God Stage 4 expert and came from a holy land that Kong Shinmu had never come into contact with before. This holy land was famous for its metal-type power and its attack power was very strong. It could be said that if Kong Shinmu wanted to become the first among the grade 6 disciples, the biggest obstacle would be this person. This was because he had the ability to defeat Kong Shinmu in one blow. This fellow's strongest attack could probably reach the level of a Transcendent God Stage 6 or even the level of a Transcendent God Stage 7 expert. Of course, this was also the opponent's peak attack. He could not maintain this state forever. However, This was enough to threaten Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu and the middle-aged man appeared in a mountain range. In the mountains, they each transformed into a divine dragon. Kong Shinmu transformed into a black divine dragon, while the middle-aged man transformed into a sword-chi divine dragon that shone with golden light. The opponent was a transcendent god stage 4 divine dragon. Therefore, in terms of aura, he completely suppressed Kong Shinmu. However, no one who could reach this stage was a fool. Therefore, this middle-aged man attached great importance to Jiang Shenwu. He was very clear that a mere peak dragon monarch was able to make it all the way until now. He definitely had some ability. Perhaps he had some trump card that could kill. Although he did not know how Kong Shinmu did it, he did not underestimate Kong Shinmu at all. This also led to him not attacking Kong Shinmu immediately after he transformed into a dragon. Instead, he was looking for an opportunity. Not planning to attack me? This person is cautious. Unfortunately, the corners of Kong Shinmu's mouth curled up slightly. If he were the other party, he would have burst out with a storm-like attack at the first moment and defeated him with his peak strength. If this dragged on, it would become more and more difficult to defeat Kong Shinmu. However, the opponent was cautious and did not attack. It was impossible for Kong Shinmu to defeat the opponent. He could only say that it all depended on how the other party was going to make a move. Kong Shinmu directly switched to his guardian stance and also transformed the formless weapon Chen Xing into the defensive battle rune state, upgrading himself to the strongest defensive state. At the same time, the God Astral Dragon technique condensed countless God Astral and the canopy of despair enveloped Jiang Shenwu and protected him. This is defense? When the middle-aged man saw this, he frowned slightly. He was puzzled. He had always felt that if the Dragon Emperor wanted to reach this level at his peak, he must have had some unexpected means. If he continued to defend like this, wouldn't he lose in the end? Could it be the counterattack talent? This middle-aged man was quite knowledgeable and had seen some counterattack type talents. When dealing with the counterattack talent, the stronger the power, the easier it was to hurt oneself. Therefore, he had to first use the weaker dragon martial skill to exhaust his opponent's strength, and then look for an opportunity to kill him in one strike. Therefore, based on his previous experience, the middle-aged man decided to first launch a less powerful attack on Kong Shinmu to test him. Suddenly, the golden swordlight divine dragon swept over with a terrifying golden swordlight. Under the unparalleled golden light, it actually had the strength of a level 5 supreme god. All of Kong Shinmu's defensive power was gathered together, and the pitch-black canopy of despair appeared, blocking the opponent's golden sword gleam. No counterattack? To the middle-aged man's surprise, Kong Shinmu did not launch a counterattack in the face of his attack. However, he could also see that Kong Shinmu seemed to have reached his limit. His level 5 supreme god attack had already made Kong Shinmu almost unable to hold on. The canopy of despair was even shaking continuously, and it could shatter at any time. Interesting. Is it because I can't break through his defense, so he didn't launch a counterattack talent? If the counterattack talent wanted to be effective, it had to be unexpected. Therefore, now the middle-aged man guessed that Kong Shinmu was waiting for an opportunity. What a pity. He felt that he would not give Kong Shinmu any chance. Then, the entire place exploded with golden light. Omnidirectional Golden Divine Sword. From the body of the Golden Divine Dragon, an extremely bright and dazzling golden light erupted. Then, countless divine swords shot out like a golden rain of arrows, sweeping towards Kong Shinmu from all directions. This was a super divine dragon martial skill that had been cultivated to the supreme sage level. The strength of its attack had at least reached the level of a level 6 supreme god. Moreover, the middle-aged man had also activated a super divine dragon weapon, increasing the power of the omnidirectional golden divine sword by several times. Facing such a powerful attack, Kong Shinmu would probably not be able to block it with his own strength. If he was in the outside world, Kong Shinmu could use the power of the star inheritance to hide in another void. Unfortunately, he was unable to use the power of the starry sky inheritance. Even his understanding of the space-type void force had been weakened. As a result, he was unable to create an independent space to hide in before the omnidirectional golden divine sword arrived. He could only take it head-on. Brilliant gem! This was the only way for Kong Shinmu. The opponent's attack was too fierce. If Kong Shinmu were to block it head-on, all his defenses would definitely be destroyed. If the opponent attacked again, Kong Shinmu might not be able to block it. Therefore, he could only activate the brilliant gem. When the brilliant gem appeared, a golden light condensed and spread around Kong Shinmu's divine dragon body. The golden light formed a protective light shield and collided with the surrounding omnidirectional golden divine sword. Golden energy ripples suddenly exploded and spread wildly in all directions like a golden storm. This time, even the defensive barrier formed by the brilliant gem was shaken. In the past, once Kong Shinmu activated the brilliant gem, he could block all attacks steadily. But now, the brilliant gem could not take it. The opponent was too strong. After all, he was a top Supreme God Stage 4 expert. On the previous battlefield, he would also be a big shot. Even when Kong Shinmu was training and using the power of the Star Inheritance, he might not be a match for the opponent. But now, Kong Shinmu had become stronger. Although he was still at the Dragon Emperor's peak, his experience and training in the Dragon Emperor's Holy Pagoda had increased his strength by several times. At this moment, although the defensive barrier of the brilliant gem was shaken, Kong Shinmu's devouring power had already been activated. At this moment, he was devouring the opponent's omnidirectional golden divine sword into his body and turning it into his own strength. Moreover, he was accumulating power and brewing it. At the same time, Kong Shinmu's resistance to the opponent's elemental power was increased to the limit. This was the strength of his devouring power. The speed of his devouring power was increased to the limit. In a short period of time, he could increase his defense. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.